because we did actually get an update from George Martin himself talking about it. So I'll read this here and I'll sort of paraphrase and skim through some of it. So he just says, the writer's strike is on. No one wanted this, no writer with any ounce of sense anyway, but the producers and the studios and the networks and the streamers gave us no choice. Gave us, he says. Right? Remember, he is sort of a showrunner. So he's in like a weird position where he has been a writer for things in the past, but at least, hey, this is the side he's on. And he probably does belong to, several unions and things like that. So he says the guild negotiated right up to the final deadline on May the 1st, but it takes two to tango. In the waning hours of May 1st, the Writers Guild of America declared a strike. The action began on May 2nd. There are pickets in front of every studio lot and soundstage in LA and many in other cities as well. Get used to them. I expect they will be here for a long time. So he sort of goes into a little more detail. He says, I'm not in LA, so I cannot walk a picket line as I did in 1988. But he goes on to his full, I want to go on record with my full support of the guild. So he goes on a little bit to talk about, just some of the writer strikes. There's one in 1988 that lasted 22 weeks. The longest in Hollywood is 2007 to 2008 strike, which we talked about last time we did an episode. Basically killed Heroes, as well as, derailed a lot of other franchises and everything. Then saying this one may go on even longer. And he sort of continues on, and we've talked about this, and he just sort of goes about like, what is the deal? Now we actually get into a little bit of news here involving some of his other projects here and some of these other streaming services. So, and the big one being, hey, what's going on with House of the Dragon and Winds of Winter and A Night of the Seven Kingdoms? So he goes on a little bit here saying, many of you will be wondering rightfully about the impact of the strike on my shows. The second season of Dark Winds wrapped several months ago. Post-production has been completed on 5 of the 6 episodes for that series. The show will likely air sometime on AMC. No decision on the 3rd. It says Peacock has passed on wild cards. It says, alas, a pity. But we will try to place it elsewhere, but not until the strike is over. The writer's room on A Night of the Seven Kingdoms, the Hedge Knight, has been closed. Ira Parker and the incredible staff of young talents are on the picket lines across the ocean. The second season of House of the Dragon started filming April 11th and will continue in London and Wales. The script for the 8 season 2 episodes were all finished months ago, long before the strike began. Every episode has gone through 4 or 5 drafts and numerous rounds of revisions to address HBO notes, my notes, budget concerns, etc. There will be no further revisions. The writers have done their jobs, and the rest is in the hands of the directors, the cast and crew, and of course, the dragons. So he goes on to give us a little more news here, saying, some of you, I fear, may be having anxiety attacks just now and are on the mistaken assumption that the strike will affect Winds of Winter. You can relax. The WGA is a union of film and television writers. It has nothing to do with novels, short stories, or any other form of prose fiction, nor comic books or graphic novels, stage plays, nor the editing of collection of anthologies. I have ongoing projects in all of those areas, and that work continues, unabated. And Winds continues to be my number one priority. So, that basically sort of sums it up. He just kind of continues on a little bit here and just says, hey, I'm in support and everything. It could be a long fight. So the big kind of takeaway, is some of the stuff that we already talked about in the episode we did last week, where we talked about, is this really going to impact House of the Dragon, right? And I was looking at this right now over on Star Wars, because season 2 of Andor is being filmed right now, and there were concerns about it affecting that show. And the showrunner just said, hey, I'm going to be handling any of the things that come on the fly. But he said in their season 1, the writers did almost next to nothing on the show. So it just kind of depends show to show. Fortunately, I guess the question here is George like a showrunner, producer in this scenario who can be the one to step in? Or is George going to say, hey, I'm with the writers? He's kind of in a tricky spot here.
Yeah, so I do know that Severance was very like they had their scripts were also finished because the two shows I actually care about on television, like the only ones are House of the Dragon and Severance on
You were
Apple
gonna say
TV.
Succession, but that's the same.
Succession, I haven't caught up, so
Oh
I do
yeah,
care
I
about
heard
it.
it's good.
I'm just, but waiting for the next season. These are the only two shows. So Severance actually did shut down, even with their scripts completed, because the producers and stuff did not want to pass the picket line. So I don't know where George will be at with this. I imagine with the hefty amount of money that he was paid by HBO, that there may be certain clauses in there that he has to show up for work. I don't know. I don't know how all the internals of that stuff work. But one nice thing is that the scripts were not just written, but rewritten and thrown out and worked and edited and everything else. So we're not talking about a first draft. We'll fix it on set. It sounds like they're pretty solidified. And also knowing that they want to be way more aggressive with their shooting schedule, that doesn't really shock me. And they probably had rumblings that this was coming. Apparently, it's been coming for a long time. So I imagine George will be there if I had to guess. Now, Ryan Condell, that's different. I'm not sure. I would like to think that as long as George is there, everything will be Gucci gang, but remains to be seen. I'm not too thrilled. The Dunkin' Egg is getting kind of put on pause, but in our last episode, I said I felt like that would probably be the case, and it turns out it is. So hopefully they can resolve this thing somewhat quickly. But we weren't going to see Dunkin' Egg for years, anyways.
Anyway. Yeah, I know that David Zaslav, who's obviously the CEO of Warner Brothers Discovery, did talk about like James Gunn and the writing process, because a lot of people were asking about, hey, the Superman movie that he's writing, because he is like the head of DC now, and he's like, and kind of like a why did you say that type of a thing, it's like all these writers are striking because they want more money, and you're like, well, he's not a writer, so he's gonna be working on it. And it's like, oh boy, that just sounds the more he opens his mouth, the less inspired I feel as a Warner shareholder. And so that's where we're at with that. But so at least that, I guess that does kind of raise the question. I mean, they can always still go to George to say, hey, what's going on, anything. I guess my other question for you, Jimmy, is, and a question that now should be sort of raised with this writer strike, shows that are being filmed currently, are they going to be rushed? Because if there's a writer strike, a lot of other shows down the pipe aren't going to be being filmed and written and finished. So I really hope this isn't the case, but with something with like House of the Dragon, thankfully it's under the HBO umbrella. But the past 2 years, that was impacted by COVID, at least over on Disney. You look at Marvel, and a big complaint about a lot of Marvel things over the past 2-3 years has been, man, the CGI is not very good.
Yeah,
because they're trying to make the release dates happen and do this sort of quantity over quality over there, and then go back and fix it later. Like that's what they've been going back after the show is aired, and like, all right, let's fix some of the CGI and make it better. So do we have any concerns there with House of the Dragon?
I would say yeah. I'm a little concerned for sure. And just also the timelines, right? Because like we are going to be waiting like a year and a half for season 2 that is on schedule right now, and that's not the best. I always say, people are like, I'm not going to watch it because like you'll be fine in a year and a half. You don't have much going on, you're going to watch it, right? But I think shows can lose steam. I think Wheel of Time has lost a lot of steam because of how long they've been taking to get season 2 out. I mean, if not, like, I literally am like,
I think that show's dead. I'm serious. I think the show's dead. I don't understand how it's, especially now with the writer strike. How I don't get it. I have it is the worst marketing. Like, it is so awful. I can't even begin to explain.
And for those who don't know, Sir Matt runs Heroes of the Horn, and he's not a hater like me.
The show's about as dead as that YouTube channel. So I mean, it's just it's just there's nothing going on with it.
Yeah. So like, whenever you wait 2 years for a show, almost that hurts. Season 3 House of the Dragon might be 2.5 years, depending on how long the strike goes, because they would be working. They already got the green light essentially for season 3. So they were starting to work on season 3, and they had mapped some things out. One thing I do feel good about is your point last week when you said that you've wondered if them like cutting season 2 a little bit short and moving stuff around, like if that was the prep for this, I 100% think it was.
Yeah.
And one of the things that George mentioned, and this is just kind of in general, I thought was interesting. He made a post today talking about what he thinks are the big issues. And he was talking about how television being cut down to even less episodes it's a terrible thing because you get less experience on set for junior writers, junior producers. And essentially he's saying that like all of the great producers of this day and age that people love are people who grew up as junior writers on shows that had 24, 48 episodes a season. And now you're only getting 8, sometimes 6 episodes a season. And there are no junior writers anymore. They are not on set. They are not in the production trucks. They're not doing these things. So George has a lot to say about that. And I always wonder if he resents the fact that like maybe Game of Thrones was, obviously cut short in the last few seasons. Like, I wonder if that really bothers him. And I wonder what he thinks about even 10 episodes for House of the Dragon. I wonder if he feels like it should be 20. I don't know.
He probably does, and I'm just putting it up here a little bit just to sort of skim through it. Yeah, this was another post he made today, and it's just sort of a little bit more about the writing experience, and all of it can be found over on georgemartin.com /not-a-blog, which is where he posts everything. But yeah, even if you look at it here, he talks a little bit about his experience as a junior writer and just what that was. None of it would have been possible if not for the things I learned about the Twilight Zone as a staff writer and story editor. He was, of course, talking about the success of Game of Thrones and everything. Yeah, you think about those shows that are like those still like NBC, ABC, Fox shows that are like the 23 minute, with commercials, 23. Those shows, that's the thing. And I think that's one of the things that like killed like Heroes, as we talked about. Now, with something like House of the Dragon, where it's going to be 8 episodes, that's where it's still an hour long. So if you sort of do the math, it's like, okay, well, it would be like the equivalent of like 16 episodes of network television, but there's a lot more, inside of a say 50-minute episode of, Game of Thrones, I think was about like 50-ish minutes a season. Then you have credits at the end, and there's no commercials obviously because it's on HBO, but how much of that is the credits, how much of that is just the opening scene, so then you condense it a little more, how much of that is just something in Game of Thrones where you'd have like huge camera pans over throne rooms and everything else, so then you begin to pan it down even more. But there is a really interesting statistic, and I'll try to pull it up here if I can, that shows the amount of dialogue per season in Game of Thrones,
and it just drops and
it goes up until about season 4, and then it just slowly goes down,
as they relied more on the big explosions,
battles,
CGI battles, Hollywood things.
So again, House of the Dragon season 2, I guess now I'm not as concerned about the filming of it, and like the writing that they can sort of fix on set. I am more concerned about the VFX budget, just because I could see them saying we need to get this out there, because the bigger problem is now you might have no shows because of this writer strike. Right. Like if you don't have any shows coming because there's a logjam and this is your big one, well, we got to get it out there, whether it's good or not.
Yeah, when those subscriptions start failing, you're going to see panic. Also, remember that the last strike was the grand pivot to reality television. That a lot of networks switched to reality TV, and we already know the Discovery bosses want to turn HBO into Dr. Pimple Popper Extraordinaire.
Seriously,
channel.
It's hold on. Has the name changed, or is it still HBO Max?
It's changed. It's Max.
Is it Max officially now?
I
when
believe
I go to HBOMAX.com, it says
maybe it's not official.
I think it's
on
the end of this month.
But yeah, they are switching it. They said HBO is too customers get like intimidated by it.
So they're gonna call it Max. Although one of their promotional images literally said Max, the place for HBO, and I was like, bro, what are we doing? Like, what? How stupid? Like, that's
so middle level management. That's what that is.
So stupid. I watched it on Max. I just don't want this
to be fumbled. I just
had it just been Warner Brothers Max, we'd be like, okay, we get it. Like, that makes sense. But I'm sure because the guy who's the CEO is a Discovery Channel guy. He's like, well, obviously we got to keep.
Yeah.
so people can watch, Forged in Fire or whatever. I mean, maybe we get some cool crossovers like that. Can we get a Game of Thrones Forged in Fire episode? Have you ever watched Forged in Fire? Because it's actually, I'm not gonna lie,
I actually like it. Yeah,
it's pretty sweet. But it might not even be Discovery. It might be National Geographic. I don't know, but no, any.